G'day.
Ooh. Oh, I see. You can see that people have jumped in. Oh, I see.
You can see that people have jumped in, which is very exciting. Welcome, people jumping in. We will give you a couple of minutes to jump on in. This is very exciting. Rant Academy numero tres. I was about to say trois and combine some languages there.
Go off. Why not?
Thanks. Lockdown. My brain has melted, so who knows?
That's life. Yep. You know what? Treat yourself.
Excellent. Oh, beautiful. Welcome everybody watching. Thanks so much for jumping in. This is very exciting to have you back for a third Rant Academy. I am your host, Bridie. And in fact, I will rename myself now because I've just realized that my name is still Is Improv. Jeeves says we all look beautiful. Thanks, Jeeves. That's also the most important thing. Absolutely. And it's the most important part of Rant Academy, so thank you very much. But anyway, hello, welcome. I'm Bridie. My pronouns are she, her. Before we start tonight, I just want to acknowledge where I am speaking to you from. I'm speaking from unceded Gadigal land, and I want to pay my respects to the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and extend that respect to elders past and present. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Welcome back if you've watched the first two Rant Academies, and if you haven't watched a Rant Academy yet, thank you for joining us for what is essentially a slightly more formal version of all the slightly boozy chats we have after class as an ensemble and faculty. Yep. That's really the best way I can describe it. Rant Academy is just kind of set up as a fun, safe space for us to really nerd out about our improv opinions. So that's kind of the point of it's Rant Academy. It's a really cute time. I think that obviously improvisation as a skill is ancient, but as a formalized art form, it's relatively young. And I get a little bit suspicious when anyone worships at the altar of one way to do improv. I find that very stressful. I like to have a little pick and mix of different tools and techniques. And so I think that's why Rant Academy has been really interesting so far, just to hear like different ideas that people have about this art form. And I think we've got a really fun and slightly spicy lineup of topics for you tonight. So you'll see Josh and Hayden and Clare. Hello, how are you all feeling?
Great.
Oh, ready to break some dreams.
Oh yeah, ready to dish.
My goodness. Last week was such a gentle Rant Academy.
Oh, wholesome.
It was really wholesome.
I can feel from energy right now. No.
We messaged afterwards and we were like, oh, it's going to be not so lovely last time.
I feel like I've invited 3 improv drill sergeants into Rant Academy, which is excellent. Cool. A few little housekeeping things before we kick off with our first talk. Again, sorry if you've been here before, I'm repeating myself, but for the new viewers, hello, you will see down the bottom, we've got a chat function. You are welcome to contribute to the conversation at any time. In the chat function, if you want everyone to see it, you have to change your settings to that because the default is that it just comes to the host and panelists, which we love. But yes, if you want everyone to see your sassy, hilarious comments, make sure you've got your settings set to everybody. You'll also see down the bottom of the screen the Q&A function. We definitely want you to use that throughout all the talks. If you have an idea for a question, pop it in the Q&A chat. That will be visible to me, so I'll be able to keep track of the questions, make sure we're not doubling up, and keep a running list of them as we go. So after all 3 wonderful speakers have terrified us, I think we'll have a Q&A all together, and it'll be a conversation for us all to kind of jump in and tease out some of the ideas. So I think that is all. The housekeeping I need to do, the rules of engagement are to keep it kind and I was going to say polite. We'll see what happens. To uphold the Improv Theatre Sydney Bill of Rights. That's that kind and spicy, Araya. Yep, absolutely right. That's what we're going to do. So, panel, are you ready to go? Are you happy? Are you good?
Absolutely.
Let's do it.
Thanks for joining us, panel. Thanks for joining us, viewers. We are going to kick off with the Wonderful. Hayden, Wright. Hayden is a faculty member at Improv Theatre Sydney, and he's also a house team coach. He began his journey with ITS about 5 or 6 years ago as a student. But Hayden has also trained overseas with Improv Olympic in Chicago, which is so cool. He's also performed and studied improv in New York, Brisbane, and Melbourne, and Canberra. So a real jet setter. I didn't mean that to be shady, by the way. Canberra's great.
It's great.
Yep. I've been there once when I was 10 and I had a really good ice cream. So that in my book, that's great. But anyway, back to Hayden. Hayden is a wonderful coach. He coaches house team and independent improv teams like Snake Pit. He's a brilliant writer. He's written lots of sketch comedy for shows like Improv Theatre Sydney Sketchy at Best. He performs with the ITS Ensemble and the indie duo Daffodil Valley. And what I love in Hayden's bio is it finishes with, he believes improv skills make better communicators and kinder communities, which I love, but don't be fooled by that gorgeous, lovely exterior, because we are about to hear from Hayden with some spicy Harold hot takes. Over to you, Hayden. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Bridie. I like to think I'm kind and spicy, as Ari's already put in the chat. Now, Hayden, he, him, I do coach alongside Josh and Claire, some of the house teams. I did study at ITS in 2015. So I think my first Harold class would have been around about this time in 2016. So all of these hot takes have come from a half decade of watching Harolds in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Canberra, Chicago, New York City, and I even saw a German one in Berlin one time. So I have hopefully done enough research that I come across as the hot-headed academic that I plan to be tonight. So here are my hot takes. Beat number one, the Harold is the most effective improv format. There are people who will tell you that it is not the best and it's not the greatest. They might be right, but when it comes to effectiveness, there is not a more effective improv tool than the Harold structure. We teach it, we perform it, it has every single ingredient to make a great improviser inside of it. We're talking the opening where you create fun ideas with groups of people. There are two-person scenes, which is like the meat on the bones of a great improv show. Group games. It is the only format where halfway through you kind of get like a bit of a muck about. It's like going to the showers halfway through a game, but instead of halftime, you get to do it twice, which is great. And my favorite part of the Harold, and I think why it is the most effective format, is because it has consequences. If you do bad scenes at the beginning, you do bad scenes at the end. So if it's all there, it is the most effective improv format for getting good as an improviser. If you get good at the Harold, you become this super powered improviser. So that's my hot take number one. Hot take number two, every single person who learns the Harold should learn it like they are a robot decoding a computer program. I truly think that an improviser's goal in the Harold is to create theater from a single word of suggestion. And the closest thing I have to that is like the Google search box. So if you type in a single word into the Google search box, there are systems and people and all sorts of strange machinations that go into you typing that one word of input into the internet and it coming back with hopefully what you want. If you can, as an improviser, put that in your brain and doing sort of like regular Harold structures, then you'll get really, really good at building theater from kind of nothing. By the time you're a regular improviser doing regular Harolds, you can execute openings and scene initiations and group games. The Harold structure is a set of instructions that takes all of those tools and puts them into making a complete show. So there's callbacks, there's usually a theme, all the nice things about a show are baked into the Harold. So I players often say, I don't like the Harold, it puts me too much in my head. I think that's great. It is a totally new, weird thing. If you're in your head learning the Harold, that tells me two things. One, it tells me that your brain is learning something new. You are having to actively think about this thing that maybe you haven't thought about before. And two, that you're learning to put together a show from all of the different tools that you have. We talked about, openings and two-person scenes and stuff like that. You're learning to take everything take all the tools off your tool belt and make a thing that has a theme or a through line, or even just feels like a good 20 minutes of improv that isn't sort of like a total mess of scenes and stuff like that. It feels like it's satisfying at the end. I get that it doesn't feel comfortable. But I like to think about it like if everyone was sort of like practicing hammering nails or like painting a board, if it goes from taking you there to building a house. Like there's no better way or set of instructions to take a group of great improvisers and get them from like good scene work to having a great show. That's my take number 2. Take number 3, great teams own their own herald. I personally believe that improv is, or really the only way we can kind of teach improv is descriptive rather than prescriptive. There is no secret sauce to making a scene. We can only tell you what like past scenes, what sort of good stuff has been in them. If we just gave you the recipe for a great scene and a great herald, every scene and every show would be the exact same. No one would like to do it. It's that magic stuff that you bring to your show and to your scenes that makes them really great. A lot of people say that great improv shows are just sort of like average sketch shows, but I think that it's not just enough to have a good herald. I think that if you're a team that is having a good herald and they are doing a good show and people are like, hey, that was fun, like I enjoyed it, it is time for you to step it up and be interesting as an improviser. You've come all this way. You've learned to nail a board. You've learned to build a house. It is time for you to sort of like blow the lid off this format. And 2 examples of that I really love. Devil's Daughter in Chicago. They've been performing together for 6 years, nearly every single week. They do a herald where their middle beat is only solo scenes. As a beginner improviser, that would scare me, seeing 3 scenes in a row with only one person and no one diving out from the back line. And again, in Chicago, there's a team called Dragon's Breath that is a team that once the show is started, there is no backline. Every single person is on stage all of the time, being like doorways or basins or like fancy tree stands. If you are bored with the heralds, if it's not challenging and you're bored with it, it is up to you and great teams to own it, to make it amazing. And like a herald gone wrong, this is beat number 4, my 4th spicy hot take. I think the reason the herald gets a rough go, and I've coached, I've taught herald, I've taught teams that are like dipping into it and maybe don't want to do it. I think the reason that it gets a rough go is because it's not simple, and I don't think that's a bad thing. For anyone who is trying to sort of attack the herald, trying to make it really, really good, and is struggling against that kind of stuff, I would pressure you to make it simple for yourself and take the pressure that you put on yourself to be great and complicated and the best improviser ever. Take that away. Just get rid of it. Make moves that are easy to read for your partners. The structure of the herald is there to catch you. It tells you exactly where you need to be in the show. If you put all of those ingredients together and you use the things you know and rely on your team, a great herald can be in your grasp. So if you don't like the herald, give it a go. If you don't like the herald because it's too hard, keep trying. If you don't like the herald because it's too simple, definitely keep trying. Make it your own, make it fun. Because the one thing I truly, truly believe, spicy take number 5, herald is the team sport of improv. Everything else is solo. Herald is the only team sport in improv. And that's my fistful of hot takes. I hope I haven't blown anyone's brains away.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brian.
Hot, spicy takes. I feel like we need one of those, you know, at Nando's, how they have the chili, which is the scale of how spicy the sauces are. Because I feel like some of those takes were spicy. We've got lots of comments popping up in the chat. Amanda, 20 plus years of improv and I'm yet to see a good one. Ooh, controversial. I love that. I've got a page full of questions from the first 5 minutes. So I'm really looking forward to jumping into this. That was great, Hayden. Thank you so much for sharing those thoughts.
Oh, I feel a weight is lifted off me. I've been able to rant about the heralds finally.
I feel like some of the things that people have spoken about in the last couple of weeks with Rant Academy, people have been holding on to for years. So I'm very happy to give you a space to unburden yourselves. So that's great. Well, thank you, Hayden. That's awesome. I can't wait to dive into some questions. But for now, let's continue this spicy time. Next up is Clare. Not only does Clare have very strong eyeshadow game, she is an amazing actor and writer. She has written for and appeared on ABC comedies Tonightly with Tom Ballard. She is a star of ABC Me's Prank You Very Much and was a writer for The Set. You love the ABC, Claire. Nice. Claire's web series, How to Be Queer, won Melbourne Queer Film Festival's 2020 Pitch Please competition, which funded production for the pilot episode, which I've seen, and it's very, very good. It will have its international premiere at Outfest LA in August. This August, her writing has also been shortlisted for a number of other awards, including ATYP's Rebel Wilson Comedy Commission and Queer Screen's Pitch Off. Clare is an amazing improviser and teacher who performs regularly all over Sydney. She's a founding member of improv troupe Confetti Gun, who have performed at NYC, New York City, no big deal. I know what that stands for. At UCB's Del Close Marathon, and she used to run Sydney University's theatre sports program. So all in all, very impressive, accomplished improviser, and now a key member of Improv Theatre Sydney. Okay, but strap in, because her provocatively titled rant tonight insults us all. And it is, we all suck at group games. Cav, over to you.
Thank you so much, Bridie Connell. And I just want to say, you beautiful motherfucking nerds, I need everybody to just and listen, because I am so fucking sick of the shitty group games I have to keep watching by everyone. Level 5, level 6, house teams, and yes, even the ITS ensemble. I know that this talk is called We Shit at Group Games, but I did want to call it You Are Shit at Group Games, and Bridie told me that that was too mean. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the function of a group game. I'm going to talk about what I see that is wrong currently, and then I'm going to tell you how to do them properly. So what is the function of a group game? They are just another kind of scene, right? But if we want variety in a show, as Hayden said, whether that is like a structured Harold or just like any kind of show, because as Calbain would say, everything's a fucking Harold, group games help give us that variety, right? They're just like another tool along with solo scenes, two-person scenes, tag support, whatever. I think they're also really great at helping us shift the energy or pacing, like from your longer, like exploratory second beats to your like super fast pace and short third beats. And they also help get everyone in the ensemble back on the same page. Are they different to an opening? Yes, they are. An opening should involve lots of different ideas, brushed past and not explored. A group game should follow one idea and heighten and explore that one idea. So an opening and a group game might look the same at the beginning, but by the second or third move, they should be completely different things. So what do we all do that is wrong? A lot of things. Number one, there are too many ideas. With a group game, we want to just follow one clear, simple, and specific idea. I see all of these group games where everyone's trying to throw every single idea in, their own ideas, rather than just following the first thing that we discover in like the first or second move. Secondly, they're never specific enough. This is true of so many improv scenes, but I think it sticks out so much more in a group game because there are so many more people on stage. So like, don't make your group game, people don't know what a dog sounds like. Make it, people think dogs actually sound like farm vehicles. It's easier to play and it's more fun for an audience to watch. Number three, people trying to be funny, individuals trying to be funny. Don't be the star, serve the scene, not your ego. Don't be an individual, be a cog in the machine. Number four, nobody listens. And I think this underpins all three of those other problems, right? If you're listening, if you're breathing, then you're going to be able to hear what everyone is saying and actually hone in on what the game that we are all playing together. Quick sidebar. Can we get rid of this whole idea of like, this is a type of group game? If I have to hear like somebody be like, but, oh, okay, which group games are we going to do in our Harold tomorrow? No. There's no freaking press conference. We could do a sound and move and we could do a game show. No, I hate it. Stop it. No, okay? Stop group games are just the worst. They put everybody in their head. They're like formulaic, so they're really like not fun to play. And even worse, they're so boring for an audience to watch because they've seen your shitty version of a game show 12 times that night. There are two types of group games, and even then, I don't really care about them. But if you want to divide it, you got one perspective group games, you got two perspective group games. So, how do you do a group game then? Okay, let's just bring it back to a really simple and nice pattern. We remember this like from like it's like in week 2 of level 1. It's like of how to do a pattern, right? A first person's offer gives us the idea of what the pattern could potentially be. The second person narrows in on more of like specifically there's like a shorter list of patterns. The third person solidifies it, and then we don't deviate. That's the pattern. There could be nothing else, right? It's the same with a group game. The first person to make an offer, whether that's just like a weird sound and movement or someone being like, all right, I need all members of Brian's Brioches in here to tell me why we've run out of brioche. The second person responds to that offer in some way, which could just be mimicking the first sound, or it could be the offer of, did you check the fridge? That second offer is the thing that is indicating where our pattern is going to go. And then the third move is just going to solidify the pattern. But again, be specific. So what we're going to do then is just keep heightening whatever fun thing you're playing with. So if it's like that first example, we could all say boop when we tap our heads, and then each time we make the boop more dramatic, or we all just suggest really obvious places to look where the brioche might be and get more and more obvious each time. You can absolutely make some diagonal moves, right? It's not just a 3 or 4 move pattern. Like if we've discussed all like the places it could be in the kitchen, maybe we move into the office of the boss. But they should be a really easy and logical step from that first move. And once we hit the height, get out of there, edit it, cut it, go, we're done. I like a way of broadening like what you could do in a group game is to think of either like a relationship, a place, or a situation where there would be a large group of people. So a relationship could be like a big family dinner. A place could be a school fete, and a situation could be something like your game show, right? Then you're going to make an offer which is grounded in truth and like normalness and pull directly from your opening that would make sense in that space. And then everybody's just going to jump on the first weird or fun thing or slight quirk that you find. And and then just like go, right? And I think the other thing is don't try and be your own individual character. That's when we get too many perspectives. You just want to be like the same as everybody else, or you could be a slight variation on the other one. The only thing I could think of was being like, you could be all different, like the 7 dwarves, you could all be different slightly, but then that should still be related to the original game and not disconnected. I don't think silence in a group game is bad. Listening is very important. And then you should just end on the funniest big thing, or you can recontextualize what's been happening this whole time and get out. Keep them short, keep them sharp. One more little sidebar is I want to go on the record and say how much I hate press conference. And I'm going to put all of my fellow It's Ensemble and faculty members on blast and say that It's the News fucking loves doing these terrible kinds of group games, and they are objectively so bad at it. We are so bad at it, right? They just like, you don't just pitch funny and unrelated ideas and then be like, oh, give me the idea. It's so uninteresting. It doesn't explore anything new, and the audience has seen it like 3 times a show for the past how many years we've been doing that show. Listen and actually engage specifically and technically with what that first offer is. Hone in, be better. So, in conclusion, group games are way simpler than you think. Stop doing these stupid stock group games. Just be better. Thank you. I love you all. The end.
My goodness, a standing ovation from Josh Mcgee. Everybody, we're all on different devices. Let's all just take a breath. Look, this is, people are loving what you've had to say. You've hit some nerves, you've hit some hearts.
Right. I
love that. I also am craving brioche. I know that's not the point of what you just spoke about, but I feel like it now. A reminder that I normally give after the second talk is to put your questions in the Q&A chat. But I now have a page and a half of questions, most of which are from me because I have so many thoughts about what's already been said. But yes, feel free to put your questions in the chat. I love that. We have a lot to discuss already. Thank you both so much so far for your passion. This is definitely very passionate, fiery night. How do you feel, Claire?
So much better. Like
Hayden, you got it off your chest.
That tension in my chest. Yeah.
It's free now. It's out there.
God, I could do anything now. Yeah, thank you so much, Bridie.
You're so welcome. I have so much soul searching to do. I love press conferences. So
I have thoughts on that I'll talk about later. But,
I feel like we could spend a whole hour on each of these chats. Thank you, Claire. That was amazing and hilarious. Excellent. So we will move on to our third and final rant for the evening, and then we will open it up to everybody to have a bit of a Q&A and a chat, and I feel like it's going to pop off. Okay, so our final speaker tonight is the supremely lovely and supremely talented Josh Mcgee. Josh has been involved in improv comedy since he was a teenager when he competed in the state finals of the Western Australia Theatre Sports competition. He has since studied long-form improv at Improv Australia and Improv Theatre Sydney, as well as at Upright Citizens Brigade in both LA and New York. He's performed as part of their Del Close Marathon, which is super cool. Josh has been teaching improv for a few years now, since 2017, when he joined the faculty at Laughmasters Academy, and he's now part of Improv Theatre Sydney. Not only is he a teacher and ensemble member, but Josh is also the director of the It's Big House and the House team whole program at Improv Theatre Sydney, which is one of my favorite parts of the Improv Theatre Sydney offering. So amazing. Tonight we are, yes, Jeeves has said it's the best program. It is. It's so fantastic. So Josh has really cultivated this amazing space there with the House team program. So tonight, Josh is going to talk about a new approach to the game called game gardening, which I'm really excited to hear about. So a little change of pace. Josh Mcgee, over to you.
Thank you so much, Bridie. Wow, those were a couple of hard acts to follow. I don't know how spicy my rant's going to be. More of a lemon.
This is exactly why I put you here, Josh, so we can take a breath. Anyway.
But look, my rant is a love rant. You can have a rant of love. So I want to talk about Game of the Scene because, well, this is kind of a controversial take. I feel like it doesn't do enough on Game of the Scene. And I feel like in our ensemble shows, I think we can kind of touch on fun games, but too quickly kind of like cut away from them. And I'm always just like, I wish we'd stayed with that scene longer and delved into it a bit more. I think Game of the Scene is often kind of described as sort of like the funny pattern in the scene, or maybe like the heightening pattern, just sort of considered like kebab shop, an exercise that you may have encountered. But I feel like there's more to it than that. It's more complex, but also kind of more intangible at the same time. It's not as rigid, and I think often the like idea of a pattern can put people off. So I would like to share with you an approach to Game of the Scene, which I feel like is a little more open-minded. It might be helpful to you. It might just be kind of a cool thing, and you think, oh, that is kind of interesting. So it's called Game Gardening. And how it works, I'm going to demonstrate with this little whiteboard here. Now, we're going to think about Game of the Scene as if it were a tree that we're growing, right? So to grow a tree, the first thing you need is basically a strong foundation, right? Soil. Kind of boring. That is your base reality, right? But as boring as soil is, and as boring as kind of the minutiae of the start of your scene can be, all of the like just object work and the who, what, where, and setting all of that up, the thoroughness of it is so crucial to building a game on top of it. It really is like your foundation. And the more uniform and kind of like raked this foundation is, the easier it's going to be for your unusual thing to pop up, right? And to be identified. If this is all kind of all over the place and there's all sorts of weird things going on in the start of your scene, it's going to be really hard to hone in on one unusual thing which you need to play a game. Something I like to do when the unusual thing pops up in a scene is I like to kind of stake the unusual thing. Sort of like when young trees are growing, they sort of put a little stake in the ground, and that's kind of an indicator to everyone else on stage what the game that you want to play is. So let me give you an example. Say there's a scene, there's a piano removalist. Someone is having a piano moved, and we're setting up all of the base reality. They're unloading the truck, talking removalist talk, but then suddenly they find out that they've lost the grand piano in the move. Now that's an unusual thing. What I might say as a player, if that popped up in my scene, is how does a piano removalist lose the piano? That's absurd. That's unheard of, right? Really telegram to your other players, like that's the unusual thing. That's what kind of the stake is, right? So then you have your unusual thing. What do you do next? You start to try and play the game off of that. And you might think, okay, well, this guy's lost a grand piano. What else is true? And we're going to start growing our tree up here, right? He might say, oh, well, this is nothing compared to the time that I lost a pipe organ. Or you should have seen how mad that symphony orchestra was when I lost all of their instruments, right? You start to kind of grow some branches, start to explore the game. And what you're doing up here is you're asking yourself, if this is true, what else is true? I'm not going to write it all out. If this is true, what else is true? Now, this is kind of like about as far as a lot of games get to, and then people panic. They sort of make one or two moves off of the unusual thing, and then they're like, well, I don't know what to do. They freeze up. They're like, I don't know what comes next or how to be funny. A great thing to do at this point, once you've kind of got something emerging, go back to your soil, go back to your base reality. Take a minute to breathe and just fertilize, right? Go back to, the minutiae of what would happen in that situation. Well, the piano removalist gets you to fill out an insurance form, and then they have to ring their boss and go through all of the expected stuff. Flesh that out. The other thing you might want to do is justify. Find some justification as to why this unusual behavior is happening. And that is the roots of your tree. Justification is super important, right? It's kind of rooting your unusualness up here to the reality that's going on. So you might start to think, okay, well, why has this piano removalist lost the piano? He did it deliberately. He threw it in the river. There's some deliberateness there. So suddenly you've got kind of some more to inspire your exploration of the game, your branches, right? Well, if he did it deliberately, yeah, that's right. I did it deliberately. I actually do this to all of my clients. I drive over the 5th Street Bridge and I throw their pianos into the river. Suddenly you've got kind of more to play with up here, right? You might kind of make another move and you might think, well, I don't know where to go. Just go back to the base reality. Just be normal. Be expected. We love this stuff. The object work, the specifics, all of that makes just good soil, right? And you can go back to the justification again, right? You can think, okay, well, if he did it deliberately, why did he do it deliberately? Maybe he just can't stand people who have grand pianos. He just has to do it to spite them, right? Suddenly he's got lots of motivation up here. He's deliberately trashing every musical instrument he sees. You can keep going. You can keep exploring your roots down here. Basically, what I want to get at is you can kind of just oscillate between these three things, right? Between exploring the branches, making kind of like fun game moves, enriching your base reality, and just going back to the justification. You can kind of just like pinwheel between those three things. And often it's going to lead to a fun game. And look, guys, the leaves are the laughs. That's part of the analogy as well. But yeah, basically, I kind of love this idea because it demonstrates that game can be more of this kind of like really interesting, dynamic, like fractal thing that keeps expanding and developing, and it's not just like 2, 4, 6, 8 what comes next. It is like this really alive thing. You can do it together. I think that like the idea of it being a gardening thing is like fits well with the like being a group activity and not having to do it all at once. It's something that kind of just happens over time, and as long as you're doing it with confidence and kind of listening and being present with your scene partner, it evolves kind of by itself. So that's my game gardening analogy. I hope that did something for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. I love that. What a beautiful analogy. I really love that as a framework. That was so great, and also just a beautiful treat.
It's looking a little dire, but
that's
I think
fine.
it's beautiful.
Growth is, it's a slow process. Josh, how do you feel after? I mean, it doesn't feel like Hayden and Claire like you needed to release that and get that off your chest, but how do you feel? Good. I have had that on my chest for a while, and I don't know how useful it is to rant to students about it or to hold workshops about it, but I got it out there. So no, I think that's great. Like I said at the start, I think as a formalized art form. Improv is pretty young, and I don't think there's one correct school of thought. So I think having lots of different analogies is a great thing, lots of different tools and techniques, because you don't know what will be that one piece of advice or that one analogy that really speaks to you, that unlocks something for you. So I think that's beautiful. Thanks for sharing that with us. I loved it. Side note, not important, but because your example was about a piano that has gone missing, our school production in like 2000 and something was about this magical piano that gets lost. And for the last 5 minutes, I've had a song stuck in my head which goes, "We're looking for a piano, a piano." So I just wanted to share that with everyone because it is a banger and it's an underrated song. It's really good. Thank you, Josh. Thanks, guys. Great. Well, the questions are flowing, and we'll get straight on into it. So some of the questions are directed at individual members of the panel, but I just want to encourage all three of you to jump in. Feel free to offer us any insights and opinions that you have. I'm going to ask you a question now, not to answer now. I want you to have this at the back of your mind, and we're going to come back to it, which is the best or most memorable Harold team or show that you've seen. So have a think about that as we ask a few other questions, and we'll come back to that a bit later because you might need a bit of time to go down memory lane. Okay, so let's kind of go through in order. We'll start with some Harold questions. Hayden, which page is on? Okay, so we had a question which is about something you said in one of your first spicy takes, and the question is from Amanda. So Hayden touched on this idea that the Harold, really, however you start the Harold is going to set you up for how you end the Harold. So bad scenes at the beginning mean bad scenes at the end, right? So that theory is really cool for training, but Amanda's question is, why should an audience want to watch that, right? If we see a show that doesn't start very well, do you think there's a way that they can maybe undo that, Hayden? What are your thoughts on that?
That is a great question. And I want to talk about the first part of it first, which is why would an audience want to watch a Harold? I think that while everyone should learn the Harold like they're a robot at their first day of robot school, I think that once you learn the structure and you understand the instructions, you should perform it like a poet. Like you should really realize that you're making art for an audience. And that means that the group games and the opening are there to make sure that your team are on the same page. And I like to think about it kind of like a check-in throughout the show to make sure, hey, are we all on the same page? Are we promising or making promises of a theme to this audience? And are we going to be able to satisfy them at the end? And I think that's the best way to think about it. If beats 1, 2, and 3 have storylines or even like themes that run through them, like TV shows have an A story, a B story, and a C story sometimes. The Harold structure itself should form this thing that looks like a piece of art. They say that a good Harold is a regular, like an average sketch show, or you can also apply that to a great play. Like you've got characters, you've got all of the ingredients to make a really beautiful piece of art. I think that you should really consider making a piece of art out of the Harold that is worthy of an audience. And also, to answer the second part of your question, if you do a really rough job in the first couple of scenes, it just means you have to get in there even harder with all of your tools and like extract meaning, extract fun, and extract emotion, because those are the things that are going to make your Harold watchable for an audience. They don't care that you've got like fun, witty lines. They are going to be there to be invested in your characters, to be invested in your scene work, and hopefully by the end to have some successful feeling of satisfaction, to be like, oh, the hero got what they yearned for, or the villain got what they deserved. Like if you don't set it up at the very beginning, you have to work even harder halfway through to make sure that it hits.
Okay, what I love that you just said, I like this idea of poetry, right? And Amanda's just said, I do like this answer. So do I. Like, I think that was really helpful, and I like the idea of poetry. Do you think then, just like, in English class, when you learn poetry techniques and you learn about stanzas and, all of those different things, is it a similar kind of thing, Hayden, where we've got to learn all these techniques, but then in order to write a good poem, which of course is subjective, it's about more being in that kind of flow state?
I think so. I think that you can write a poem to structure, and it could be a perfectly fine poem. You can do an improv show to structure, and it can be a perfectly fine improv show. I think you need to find the art and the challenge of using that structure to make it interesting. So yeah, actually no, I'm going to keep my examples of good Harolds for later. I don't want to waste them all here. Sorry, Amanda, but keep tuned in. But I truly think that not only is it a great teaching tool, it's a great practice tool, and used appropriately, it can be an incredible performance tool as well.
I love that. Thanks, Hayden. So, okay, so the next question, we had a couple of things. You spoke about how sometimes you can get a bit in your head when you're learning the Herald, and so a few questions sort of touched on that sort of theme. So this is my issue as a performer when I am doing the Herald. I absolutely love it as a teaching tool because, like you, I think there's so many fantastic foundational techniques that the Herald reinforces, which we need no matter what format we're performing. And I love it as a tool in jams and practices for myself as a performer. But I find when I perform a Herald, I get really stuck in my head sometimes because I'm thinking of like, oh, hang on, what comes next? What am I up to? A group game. And I think because I'm always sort of thinking about the bit that comes next in a Herald, therefore I'm not truly improvising because I'm thinking ahead. So if I'm thinking ahead, I'm not present. Am I truly improvising? Please discuss, you three. What is improv?
I mean, I think that's part of the impressiveness of a Herald is you are doing both, and your brain can multitask, thinking ahead and being present. I think when you're really practiced at Herald, you can kind of, the thinking ahead part starts to happen more and more subconsciously, and you don't sort of have to dwell on it too much. But yeah, I think that's kind of part of the beauty of it, like the impressiveness of the Herald.
Yeah, I think as well we get it because at least like in Sydney, from what I see, like people only say that like when you go and see a Herald, you're seeing a level 5 grad show. So it's the first time they've ever done a Herald. They've spent 8 weeks doing it. You can't be good at anything after 8 weeks. Like that's not me trying to throw shade. That's me being like, it's not going to be good, right? It's going to be like the first time you've done it.
As all my lockdown projects will back that claim up. Yes.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah. Or you're maybe seeing a house team who are, again, like that is a structure thing, or that's like a learning tool. But again, like I feel like a lot of house teams after a while, like, okay, we're going to do a Herald, but we're going to do our own twist on it or whatever. And after that, you don't like, no one is like, we're doing a very specifically, I'm losing my track, but like, no one is like, we're doing a very specifically structured Herald. So it's, if we're thinking of like when I've seen a Herald perform, it's probably because you're seeing people who are just starting to learn this art form do a Herald, and yeah, it is gonna suck in a way. There are going to be beautiful moments, but yeah, on the whole, you're going to be in your head, and that is the point of a Herald. And like the thing is that like the reason that I really like a Herald is because it does teach you how to structure a show, and you should be thinking ahead in improv. Like you shouldn't be planning the ending necessarily and like forcing it that way, but you should be like, okay, well, where in the show are we? Because otherwise you're just going to give, and like you need to serve the audience by going, okay, well, where are we? What do they need? Have we had a lot of really short paced scenes and we need something longer? And the reason that a Herald is useful is that it forces you to do that. And then by the time that you don't need the structure of a Herald anymore, you're just serving the show. So maybe you actually have 5 first beats, and then maybe you actually only need 2 second beats. And then we're going to do 3 group games back to back. And then we're going to have a random solo scene that has nothing to do with it. And then we're going to like accelerate to the end. And so you don't like, I think my long answer is, yeah, you should be in your head because that's the point of a Herald.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love that. We've had a couple of comments here, which I think just sort of echo some of the thoughts that we had, which I will share for those who watch the recording later and cannot see the comments. Alistair has said, when you're improvising, you have to be an actor in the moment, but sometimes you also have to be a writer thinking about the structure of the show. And then Kale Bain, don't know who that is, sounds like a fake name. Herald gives the opportunity to have 3 brains. 1, what's happening now? 2, what can I do with this later? And 3, how does this tie into the big picture? So that is that's some nice thoughts there from everybody. I think that helps clarify that for me. So thanks. I'm in charge of this. I can ask questions, which just help me. I love it. Okie doke. Let's go with that question I had for you before. The best Harold team or show that you've seen. I'd love you all to jump in if you've got an example, and then we will move on to some group game questions. Who wants to kick us off?
I remember vaguely remember a Harold that was performed at the Del Close Marathon when I was there a couple of years ago. That was part of the One of Us is Drunk show, and which I think there was a few different improv teams that came and did this really late night show. And the premise was one of the people on the team was very drunk, differing amounts of drunk, and they just improvised together, and you had to try and figure out as an audience member who you thought was drunk. And they did it. They did a Harold, and impressively, the person who was drunk held it together. It was very clear, very early in the piece, that they were just giggling all through every scene. But it was even more impressive when they actually made some big moves and started to pull it together. It was in their bones, obviously, despite being just absolutely blind. It was great.
Probably freed the inner artist. I love that. I feel that's a very Lord Byron approach to improv. I'll find the muse within this bottle. Claire, what's the best Harold team or show that you've seen?
Well, I'm going to take this to mean a structured Harold because I do believe that everything is a Harold. So,
all right, Kale.
I think that is important to say because I don't want to throw shade, because I am going to also talk about something I saw overseas, not because I think Sydney improvisers are better than a lot, in my opinion. But if I'm talking about specifically structured Harolds, I saw a team in New York called Higgins a few years ago, and they it was a Harold night, but they had been together for years, and everything was structured as a normal structured Harold, but they moved from scene to scene by just it was like a repetitive motion, but there was scenes within scenes within scenes, but they maintained the structure of the Harold. And it was just very as an improv show, wah.
Cool. Thanks, Claire. Hayden, what about you?
Yeah, I have fallen in love with the team Devil's Daughter. They are Chicago-based. They have a Patreon. They produce podcasts and lots of stuff. I highly recommend checking them out because that was the show that I realized that I loved the Harold. Their opening was an organic opening, and it informed every single edit throughout the entire show. So they took something that was in the very first moment and made it theatrical and pulled the whole show together. And what I said before about their whole middle beat being solo scenes, the group game finished, one person came out to perform, and my young improviser heart was like, someone come out and help them. Someone come out and help them. I freaked out. The thing went fine. And I was like, oh, thank God that's over. And it happened 2 more times before the second group game. And I lost my mind. I thought it was really, really great. It was such a beautiful, such a practiced team, putting in the work, supporting each other, and just allowing for one person to just, hey, you're great. You're going to do this thing. We're here to support you with weird sounds or noises or whatever. But we trust everyone in this team to go and do that one solo scene in the middle, that the whole show is just going to be fun. That was the moment I was like, maybe Harold is for me.
I love that. That's great. Also, Devil's Daughter is a great name, which I think it must be said that naming your improv troupe is a skill in and of itself. Kale has just said, and I think it's worth sharing, quietly, there have been 3 rants here and we're wrapping them up together. It's a Harold. Woo. I love that. Thanks for those answers. That was great. Let's have a few questions around group games. So let's start with one which I sounds funny, but I think is a really good question. Claire, how does one start a group game without saying, all right, everyone, gather around? That's from Jeeves, and goodness me, that's a good question.
That is a great question. Kale has said boop. Yes, you could start with boop. First of all, I don't think it's necessarily bad, particularly when you are starting to do Harolds with your troupe, to be everybody get in here, to signpost really hard. I think we have this weird thing that we're we have to be subtle in improv, but I think no, just it's better to be clear. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, but I think this is unhelpful, but it's a vibe. I think you just need to you should pick up, hopefully if you're all good and you're all on the same page and you have good group mind, it should be oh, it feels like this is a group game situation. Or someone could just make an offer and then and I've seen this happen. Someone makes an offer, the second person comes on and like accepts that offer and makes another one. And then a third person is like, oh, I'm going to jump on. And then if that third person jumps on, then hopefully everybody else jumps on and continues. So it's like, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that's great. I love it. Excellent. Amanda has said, I'm triggered back to 2006 and you tried to teach us Harold's kale. Harold taught me the kale. Kale also.
And in some ways it did.
Yeah, I know the kale bean format better than I know the Harold format, to be perfectly honest. Excellent. Okay, now we've got some questions about the purpose of group games. So a couple of questions that kind of go together and anyone feel free to jump in. So from Kieran, aren't group games more about idea generation than exploring ideas? And another question from Sam, which I think is sort of related, is just a good technical question. Should a group game relate to the scenes that have been played, or is it a palette cleanser that just stands on its own? So let's jump into the, like, yeah, what's the purpose? Is it idea generation, palette cleanser?
Yes, so I think its primary job should not be idea generation, because if you're doing like a structured traditional like 25-minute Harold, you should have enough ideas from your opening. And if you're still trying to generate new ideas after your first beats, then I think you're doing something wrong. You shouldn't be introducing lots of new ideas. But having said that, in like a more unstructured, like hour-long show where you're using like group games, then yeah, they totally can do that, but that's not their main purpose. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I definitely think of them more as palette cleansers and not idea generators. But then I can definitely think of Harolds that I've seen in class that a brilliant idea has come out of a group game.
Totally.
And I've desperately wanted to see it like played out in a scene.
Yeah.
And it has sometimes, and it's great. But yeah, I think it like in purpose, it should be more of a just like, here's something wacky. Like I like to like in group games, if you're explaining a Harold like it's a sitcom episode, they're like the ad break, right? They're just something like so totally unrelated and big and flashy and just wacky before you go back to the action. So
yeah, I tend to agree. I think that the purpose of a group game, I like to think about it like everyone going and sitting on the bench real quick. They are about super simple ideas, and hopefully that idea has existed in the show already, or maybe is about to. It shouldn't tie back to anything that you've previously set up, but if you're building to a theme, it must, I like to imagine that if the person coming to initiate a group game is going to offer something to the show, and then the rest of the team is going to decide whether that thing stays or goes. And you should be, hopefully everyone on the team is listening at that point to say, oh, great, we had 3 scenes. All of them are about like the idea of fatherhood. Maybe let's try a fatherhood scene. Just super simple game where everyone can jump in and add an idea. And if it stays, it stays. If it goes, we just don't do that theme for the rest of the show. Group games, I think, like if you think about the gardening metaphor again, should be about trimming ideas from your show instead of like making them more.
Ooh, I love that.
Also, having said all that, I think as well, like a group game is just another kind of scene, and like it's just that more people are involved, which is why I think you need to make it simpler, because there's too many brains otherwise. But like, yeah, it can, like in the same way that another 2-person scene can generate ideas, or it can, like as Hayden said, like pick and choose themes to say and go, or make connections. Like it's the same thing. It's just that you have more bodies in the space doing it.
Love that.
I think group games should be dumb.
I definitely agree.
I think they should be really smart and change the world. So.
I think all of the other scenes can be that, but whenever it's like a group game, especially if you've got really smart players who really want to like prove their wit and you know, their like prowess or whatever, I just prefer it so much more when everyone is just going boop.
Do you know why? But that's because you're like, if it's like the easiest way of being like, this show needs more variety. Like I think that everyone's like, this is what it should be, but it's like group game is just so different from a 2-person scene that it's like, that's like, if the rest of the show is too heady, yeah, of course it should be. But if all of your 2-person scenes are really fucking dumb, then your group game should be really smart and wordy. Like I think that this whole, like, it should be this, it's like, it's just about the variety and the shape of the show.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is a cheap, easy way of being like, here's a great way to get that variety in.
Yeah, I think, we talked about actor brain and writer brain. I like to think of the Harold with a bit of director brain. Group games are when you need light and shade, you need to bump the energy up because and we need to change the pace. We've had a bunch of 2-person scenes. So I think thinking, theatrically from that kind of viewpoint can be quite helpful. Last question on group games. One of your complaints, Claire, was the idea that they're too formulaic. That isn't the Harold.
Okay. Great question. No.
Thanks.
Did you write that question, Bridie?
I sure did.
Okay. All right. No, because yes, a Harold has structure, but it's not formulaic. Whereas I think what I'm saying when I was saying I hate press conference, I hate it because people are leaning on external kind of like gags and what they think it's meant to be. And so when people are like, oh, we're going to play a game show group game, or we're going to play a sound, like that's not actually listening to what is needed in the moment. So they are formulaic when people are saying the same words, but the structure, which is what a Harold is being like, there's one perspective or there's two perspectives, and that's all and we're simply heightening a pattern, and that's all we're doing.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I love that.
Press conference especially is so like you get the same jokes wheeled out, like the whole like reporters saying that they're like from this wacky publication, like, and it's always like a conspiracy or something, and it's sort of these like really well-trodden jokes about like news media, and it's just like, yeah, I know what you mean. I think that's perfect, Claire. It's formulaic, but not, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a good answer. I think that's great. Yeah, I'm just getting defensive about press conference.
Can I say,
really good ones.
I love press conferences because I think that they can be really fun and they're great. But I think that the point is that people don't actually play them well, and so you just see people be like, "Oh, it's a group game. We'll do a press conference," but no one's listening and everyone's just doing it. You just see really shit ones. But I also love press conference, but it's more funny if I say that I hate them. That's the secret to comedy.
Yeah. Just
have a strong opinion.
And that's, again, the most important thing for us is to try to be funny. Cool. Alistair, you've got a question in the chat about Josh and Claire's rants, but I'm not sure if I entirely understand it. So just that second sentence, could you maybe have a look at that? Because I want to ask it, but I want to make sure I'm asking it correctly. There's another question here. Should structure take precedence over amazing ideas that come up organically? I feel like I know the answer from everyone.
Can I take this one?
Hayden, please.
We nearly hit it before, and it is the idea that the Harold structure exists to train you into imagining what a show needs. So a show needs to have an opening. It needs to have difference in the scenes that you begin. So like it's very strict about like start one thing, start a separate, totally different thing, start a third, totally different thing, but then have breaks in there. I think that the Harold structure teaches you what a show needs, and so you don't need to do 3 scenes group game, 3 scenes group game. And to the point where we were talking about before of kind of like, are we thinking forwards? Are we thinking backwards? If you have become like the Harold Zen master, all you're doing is going, what does this scene need? Does this scene need to be quiet? Does this scene need to be loud? Does it need to be long, short? Does it need to be emotional? Does it need to be silly? Like, hopefully, if you've practiced the Harold structure and you have all of the things that were in your head at the beginning sort of like sink into that weird lizard brain at the back, you don't have to think about how many scenes are in the first beat versus the second versus the third. You just you intuit the best parts of the show, and then you just build from there.
I love that. I want us all to become improv Zen masters. That sounds so lovely and gentle. And I feel like Zen masters reminds me of trees, which reminds me of Josh. Josh, I got a question about the stake in the ground, which is going to support that unusual thing that's popped up out of the soil, right? So the stake essentially from, if I'm understanding you right, is like that amazing support or the support players that come in and really back up that first unusual thing, right? How do we know that we've supported it enough that our little unusual seedling is established enough that we can start to explore? How do we know that the stake is supporting?
It's not so much supporting. I mean, I think that's kind of a nice byproduct of it as well. But I sort of more mean it as like a signpost, really, that like there is something growing here. Like everyone be aware that there is a game trying to grow here. And it's more of like, I guess it's more of like, those kind of like cylinders of plastic that they kind of wrap around like little seedlings. I guess it's more like that in that it's sort of protecting it from getting trampled by people trying to make like big new offers and stuff. So I think as long as it's acknowledged, and I think you can be very, very obvious with acknowledging it, and literally, like, I've seen some great scenes that have started with an unusual thing and players have like outright said like, that's a very unusual thing to say. And that's kind of funny in and of itself because it's just so blunt. But it's like there's no escaping it. Like when you're really like addressing the elephant in the room, you have to deal with it. And I hate when scenes like kind of getting off on a rocky start and someone makes like a great offer of just something that I would just love for them to unpack, and it just kind of gets left in the dust because it's sort of overlooked, or everyone like hears the offer, but then there's another thing that was kind of weird, so they want to deal with that. So I guess avoiding that is the purpose as well.
Yeah.
I just quickly on that one, we had a conversation about questions in our house team a few months ago, and I think that the normal advice is, hey, don't ask questions, you should always be building. Asking a question is a really good way to frame an unusual thing. And even Josh said it in his example of like, oh, how does this character do this verb, is a great way of being like, oh, we found it, it's over here. And so if we ever have a discussion about like, but why can't you use questions and stuff like that, I think about the way you use them to serve the scene and your scene partners is to just like literally go, hey, we found gold, we struck gold, we set the soil, like this is the way it goes.
I love that.
Totally.
Yeah, great. This, what we've just kind of touched on, ties into Alice's question, which you've just resent. So thank you for that. So here we go. This great question. So game gardening. We have our first unusual thing. We put the stake in the ground. We're framing the game to make it clear. Mm-hmm. As per Claire's rant, we're not all playing the same idea. There's too much going on. We get confused. So how can we get better at playing the same idea? Does it all come down to that staking that we just talked about? What are some of the things that you think can help us like get on that same page ASAP? Because that is a common problem.
I actually do like that. I think that Josh's like calling it staking is a great call, because I think if like, okay, going back to like the press conference kind of vibe, I actually think that that's a really great one where like the person who's running the press conference like asks for questions or whatever it is, and then the first person says like their answer, the second person then says it. It's actually a great chance then for the person running the press conference to kind of say, this is the game we're playing. No, you're all asking me where is the brioche, when in fact you should be asking me who made the brioche or whatever it is. And I think it goes back to, but also like anyone can say that, right? Like anyone in the team can say that. And it goes back to that idea of like, it's okay. I don't know why I'm talking about brioche. It's the only example I can come up with. I hadn't bought a brioche anyway. It goes back to that thing of we feel like we need to be coy and subtle as improvisers when actually just naming it helps everyone get on the same page. And then eventually when you know each other really well, you don't need to necessarily say the game, and that is more fun for an audience to watch. But an audience doesn't care if you name what the unusual or the game is or whatever it is, and anyone can do that.
Love that. Any other thoughts, Josh or Hayden?
The other thing, I mean, I think, yeah, that's great. Like being super obvious is a great way to get on the same page. And the other thing that I think people are often too afraid to do is like echo each other. And I encourage it in group games as well. Like when someone says something funny, like just repeat it. You know, that's a great way to not only like honor what like someone else did, but also like kind of guide the group into the one kind of like idea. And it's sometimes just really funny when someone just says something really left of field, like boop, and then someone else just says boop apropos of nothing. Like it's suddenly like the pattern is underway.
Repetition can just confirm the unusual thing. That's helpful. That's great. Sorry, Hayden.
No, it's also like the audience needs to be involved. Like if you say the thing, they get to feel like, oh, good, I get it now. I have no other questions about the scene. I know exactly what's going on. The moment that you hear sort of like the laughs die away, the leaves fall off the tree, is when questions arise, and those are usually because there's someone's tried to be too coy. There's subtlety. There's maybe two people haven't arrived at the same observation or things like that. The clearer you can be to your scene partners, and the clearer you can be to the other people in the room, the entire audience that you've invited along, the more fun you can have.
Yeah, love that. Love that. This is a really nice kind of chat, which kind of boils down to support and just like, don't be afraid to be obvious. And maybe that is the best form of support that we can give each other sometimes, which I love. We could keep talking about all of this stuff for a long time, but I just realized we've gone about 5 minutes over. So thanks for watching, everyone. And thank you for your beautiful, generous answers, the three of you, and for your passionate, spicy rants. I really appreciate that. Before I let everybody go, I just want to tell you about our speakers next week. We've got a great lineup. We've got one of my favorite improvisers to watch on stage because she's so bubbly and joyful, Amanda Buckley. Amazing. We've got Patty Styles, who, if you watched last week, Jim mentioned Patty's new book, which is amazing. So we're going to hear some really great stuff from her. And we've also got Susie Youssef, and it's going to be just a really great time. So tune in next Thursday as well. But as always, thank you so much, everyone, for coming along to this very joyful, nerdy space. It's great. Josh, Claire, and Hayden, thank you so much for your thoughts. I feel like my head is spinning in the best way. I have a lot of thinking and processing to do. And I think I will really take that garden analogy with me. It feels really lovely to me. So thank you. Well done, everybody.
Delightful. Thank you.
Thanks, Bridie.
Pleasure. And we'll see you next week, everybody. Stay safe. Bye.
Bye.